Hello everyone and welcome to the hands-on video guide on eDelivery Dynamic Discovery Client, or simply DDC. In one of the previous videos, I have already explained the purpose of DDC in Dynamic Delegation Discovery System infrastructure, but for those who miss it, I will do a recap now. However, for more in-depth information, I suggest to check the video about Dynamic Discovery infrastructure. The dynamic discovery infrastructure plays an important role in enabling message exchange in a network with many participants where sender doesn't know in advance the server location of the recipients. So, how is then message sent then in such cases? The answer is with dynamic discovery client who lookups the missing data during the message submission. Now, imagine a situation where company A needs to send a message to company B using a discovery infrastructure, and here is how it works. First, company B already made all preparation steps. It obtained the unique identifier for the network, has already published its capability metadata to the SMP instance, which we will call SMP2, and the SMP2 has associated the company B identifier with itself in the network SMS service. And the submission process is then executed as follows. Company A generates the message and set as a recipient the company B identifier and submit it to its access point provider, which we will call access point A. However, at this point of time, access point A lacks the necessary connectivity data to send the message directly. So in step 5, it activates its DDC, and DDC first lookup in the SMS service where company B publishes its metadata, and the SMS service responds with the URL address of SMP2. In subsequent step 6, a dynamic discovery client initiates an HTTP request to the SMP2 and retrieves the company B connectivity data, which are pointing to the access point B. Once the data are obtained, the access point A uses them to successfully submit the message to access point B, where in the last step, the company B retrieves the message. In this guide, we'll delve deeper with hands-on experience on step 5 and 6 of this process. But before we start, I would like to note that this video is based on the scripts, so-called how-to guides, which we made for you. And all the comments I'm going to use today during this presentation are listed here. So if you will not catch all the comments or links, just don't worry, just go back to this page and you will find everything you need to repeat the exercises I will do today. We are all set now, and let's start with our first task, and that is to download eDelivery Dynamic Discovery Client example, which we are going to use during this course. The Dynamic Discovery Client is located in the eDelivery Nexus. You can find it under the eDelivery repository, EU, Europa, Dynamic Discovery Client, and we should download the artifact named with Dynamic Discovery Client CLA, which is for the Command Line Interface software, and we will be using 2.1.1 version. We can download the artifact using the browser, but I already also prepare a command in this script which are using the wget, which I'm going to use now. And please note also that I named the downloaded artifact to ddc.jar, and this is just because all the commands which we will use today will be much shorter with this name. And I will be using the Ubuntu bash, but all these commands should also work fine with Windows and on Mac. And please note also that to execute these commands, you have to have installed Java. In my example, I have Java version 11, but also other versions from JDK 8 onwards should work fine. But let's start now the dynamic discovery with the wget command. I will just paste the command here. And let's wait for the application to be downloaded. And this is it. We have Dynamic Discovery jar here, and we run it as every Java application with Java -jar and DDC. And if you don't provide any options, it will just print out the commands which we can use with this application. And there are two commands: the DNS, which is used to look up the DNS, and the other one is get, which is used to get the document from the SMP. And initially, so we will start with the DNS command. And if you would like to see what kind of options we can put to the DNS command, we can use the same command as before, and we will add -DNS command and -h to see all the options. So we have D for the domain on which we will search, and O for the output, and so on. So let's continue with our next task, where we will try to find out the SMP URL where participant identifier publishes its metadata. And for this task, I prepared in step 3 an example for the participant identifier, which is the one I just selected here. And I publish the NAPTER record in the domain test.acc.edelivery.tech.ec.Europa.eu. And if you copy paste this command, the same way as I did right now, and paste it to the console, we should see what the Dynamics Discovery client will find. So in the first line, it prints out what the Dynamic Discovery client is doing. So it's resolving the DNS for the participant in the domain, which is listed here. Please note that this domain is actually added as an option to the initial command. And then it prints out the NAPTER query. So before the query is executed, the Dynamic Discovery client must generate the query. It's like this. The first part is the hashed value of the participant identifier, and the second part is the domain, is the DNS domain or DNS zone where the lookup is executed. And this is the result. As you can see, this is an NAPTER record. And the last value in this line is actually the result the URL we are searching for. And if I copy paste this URL, and if I put it into the browser, you can see that here is the SMP instance. And if you check for the party ID 001, which is the identifier part of the participant identifier we are searching for, you can see that it is registered in this SMP. Let's continue now with the next step, where we will retrieve the document from the SMP, the document which was published by this participant identifier on this SMP. This document is very simple. It's a service group. We can check it now from the SMP UI, if you just click this open URL. And this is the document which we are trying to target and retrieve with the Dynamic Discovery client. And for this, I already prepared a command here in step 4. And the command is like this. Please note that now we will use the get command. Everything else is the same. The participant identifier and the domain is the same. What we will just add in the end is this O, because we will print the result in the file name called servicegroup.xml. So if you copy paste now this command, like I will do it right now, and we will paste it to the console, like this, and we press enter. The Dynamic Discovery client will execute both steps at the same time. First, it will look up in the DNS to find out where the SMP is located, and then it will generate the HTTP GET command to get the document. And if you check now in this folder, you can see that there's a new file which is called servicegroup.xml, and we will open it now with editor. And if you inspect this file and the file we saw before in the SMP, you could see, or you can see, that they are the same. In the next step, we will try now also to download the sub-document or a sub-resource of the participant identifier. To show you what I mean, I will again open the Dummy SMP instance, and I will show you a bit more of the configuration for this participant identifier. So if I click here, I will expand all the subdocuments which participant identifier publish on this SMP, and we can see that there's one document, which is called connectivity document 01. And if I open this URL, the document will be shown. And this is the document which we are searching for exchanging the messages using this service or document. So connectivity document 01. And this service metadata, as is it called by the OASIS SMP terminology, contains the endpoint URI, so the URL of the access point where we would like to submit the message, and the certificate for the endpoint. And how we can tell to Dynamic Discovery to download, to fetch this document. It's very easy. We will actually extend the already provided comment from here, and we will just add the document, so the sub-document we would like to fetch from the SMP. So we will add two new options to the command. The one is the identifier of the document, and another one is the sub-document scheme, which is the message exchange. I will just copy paste this command, and I will paste it into the console. Please do the same. And then I will press enter. And the Dynamic Discovery will fetch the document. And now if I check the folder, you can see that there's one new file over here. It's called servicemetadata.xml. And if I open it in editor, you can see that this is the document I was searching for with the Dynamic Discovery client, and which is published on the Dummy SMP. In the next step, I would like to show you two different topics, which are usually not heavily used in the dynamic discovery process, but for the developers, it's good that they are aware that they exist and they can use for example, for testing or for developing its own application. And the first topic is that for dynamic discovery to work, we actually don't need SMP application to publish the documents. Any other server which has option for HTTP GET for getting the documents is suitable for this task. In our example, we will use GitLab repository where I publish two documents. And this is the address of our GitLab repository. I will click it here so that we can check. And I publish here the document, two documents actually, and we will search for this one. You can notice that the participant identifier I used in this case is not ABCore party identifier, but this one is more like, the format is more like the one which is used in the PEPL network. The second thing you can notice here that I don't use or fetch here the OASIS SMP 1.0 documents, but I'm using the OASIS CPPA CPP document instead. So how can we fetch the document from the code repository? For that to happen, I first had to configure the new DNS Napter record in our XML service. And it's like this. I did that manually, but I will not go more in details here because this is not the scope of this presentation. I would just like to point your attention to the Napter service, which is in this case Meta CPPA3, because we are now fetching the CPPA3 document. And also please note the URL, which is pointing to our code repository. And second thing I would like to bring your attention to is that the document name, that for the document name I publish in the code repository, I use the participant identifier, which is like this. And with our dynamic discovery client, we can double check if this DNS record is really registered in our DNS. I'll just copy paste this command below. Please note again the service I'm using. And I'm fetching just the Napter records. And if I press now enter, I can see the result here. And I see that the record is registered in our DNS. At this point, I would also like to show you another option, how you can check the DNS, if the DNS exists, if the DNS record exists in the DNS. You can use the DIG application, which is one of the utils which is shipped with Band9 server. And the bad side of this approach is that you have to generate the domain, the DNS domain manually. But when you have it, you can use this command. And if I put this into the console and press enter, you can see the response from the DIG. And here you can also see the same DNS Napter record, which was returned also by our dynamic discovery client. So we are all set now to fetch the document. This is the last command I put in this chapter 6 for retrieving the document from the code repository. As you can see, it's almost the same as the record we used before, just that we use now service Meta CPPA3 for the Napter records, and this is it. Let's copy paste this into our console. And if I check the files, we can see that we have now a new file here. And if I open it with editor, you can see that this is the CPPA example, which I publish in our code repository. In all our examples where we fetch the document in this video presentation, our dynamic discovery client always executed two steps. First step was to locate the SMP URL address, and the second step was to fetch the document from the SMP instance. But sometimes, for example, in small networks where they have just one SMP, or maybe even for the development and testing, where we would like to skip the DNS lookup and all the complexity to setting up the DNS for the test environment, we can download the document directly from the SMP using our dynamic discovery client. And we can do that just by simply setting one option, which is called -SMP option, where we can put the URL address of the SMP instance directly. And the dynamic discovery client will skip the DNS lookup in this case, and it will try to fetch the document directly from this SMP. And here is the example of the command. It's under the step 7, direct document fetch. And if I copy paste this command and put it in our console, it will fetch the document directly from the server. And if we check again the document, so direct fetch, this is the document which is published. With this last step, we concluded our video presentation about Dynamic Discovery Client. I hope you enjoy it, and I would also like to invite you to watch other videos we prepare for you about the TOMI SMP application.